Kingston is coming to Columbia and leaving the South Florida Bulls to become the new head coach for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now, of course, the school has not released anything regarding a move or a hire for the baseball program. They have not sent out any sort of press release, made any sort of announcement. But it has been reported by multiple outlets around the Southeast that Kingston is on his way to Columbia. There were some Twitter rumors flying yesterday that Clemson head coach Monty Lee had met with Ray Tanner about the head coaching position and that he was, at the very least, meeting with the Carolina AD. Monty Lee has denied that directly on the record to Sports Talk that he did not meet with Ray Tanner. So Monty Lee says he was not in a meeting with South Carolina's athletic director. And, of course, if this report turns out to be true, as it appears that it is, then that's all for naught. But Mark Kingston is apparently, reportedly, going to be the new head coach for the South Carolina baseball program, replacing Chad Holbrook, and probably not the name that a week ago or 4 days ago or 48 hours ago that a lot of Gamecock fans probably would have picked if you had given them the option.
Well, that's what I was saying. You know, I think Ray Tanner is comfortable in his own skin. And I ask, you know, is Ray looking to get a winner and a good fit in here, or is he looking to win the press conference? And sometimes your best hires is when you don't win the press conference. Kingston, arguably one of the hot coaching candidates this year. I guess the third time is the charm, Rickson, because he had interviews with Alabama and Virginia Tech, and then finally he ends up in Columbia. But I think, you know, the fan base has to kind of kick back and relax and let a guy do his work, because let's face it, they said they wanted O'Sullivan. When O'Sullivan was hired, he was an assistant. He wasn't even a head coach. And some of your best and the two hottest coaches last year, young coaches in the SEC, both Kentucky and Mississippi State, both hired assistants and got them in the upper echelon, and a big turnaround for both teams last year in the SEC. So don't look at the name. Let's look at the results and then give the guy a chance.
Well, Kingston has been officially christened by Wikipedia. He is now listed as South Carolina's head coach on his Wikipedia page. So take that for what it's worth. Here's where the thing that I understand why there are Gamecock fans who maybe disappointed isn't the right word, but kind of look at this potential hire with sort of an underwhelmed reaction. And I can understand why from a fan standpoint, but here's what I think people need to keep in mind. South Carolina in this position, in searching for a baseball coach, in my mind, they have got an advantage that a lot of programs around the country don't have, and that's that their athletic director has probably built as many contacts in the world of college baseball as maybe anyone else at the Division I level, in Ray Tanner, a guy who was arguably one of, you could say one of the top 3 coaches in the country when he was in the dugout for the Gamecocks. So if Ray Tanner has looked at Mark Kingston and talked to Mark Kingston and he's pulled the trigger on it, then if you want to complain about the record and you want to complain about the NCAA tournament's success or lack of success in the postseason, okay. But the AD, who knows more about college baseball than probably anybody in the state, has decided this is the guy. So if Ray Tanner thinks this is the guy, I think, like you said, Pro, the least that fans can do is at least give the guy a chance. And I don't mean 5 games into the year. I don't mean by mid-March. I don't mean by the end of 2018. See how this works out, because your athletic director, who knows a thing or two about college baseball, said this is the one.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about it is if you look at it from the other way, Rickson, it's interesting to note that people say we want a big name. Say I'm Bob Knight, and the athletic director who's trying to hire me is John Wooden. Now, if I'm a big name coach, maybe I don't want to work under athletic director who is a big name coach in the same sport. So sometimes you got part of the fit is is this coach comfortable in his own skin to have his boss be a guy who's been in the dugout? So, that there's another fit that has to work there. And as I said, this guy has had interviews through one ACC interview, one SEC interview. This guy's a hot commodity right now. And he's won at South Florida, where he has to compete against a major league team and the Gulf of Mexico. And so they don't have a lot of crowds there, fan fervor there. But he's won. In fact, when we'll talk to Mike Morgan, we'll ask him about it because he played in the same Gainesville Regional that they played in. And I think he took Florida to 15 innings or something in one of the
12 innings. Yeah, it took him to 12 innings in a loss. To me, the more impressive thing, though, is South Florida, two tournaments in 3 years. Guy won at Illinois State.
Yeah.
He took Illinois State to the NCAA tournament. Now, he's been able to win with programs that historically have not been baseball powers. Now, he hasn't gone to Omaha, but he's gotten them to the NCAA tournament, which I think that's a measure of something a good coach can do. He can take those players, develop them, get them to the postseason. And by the way, when he gets to Columbia, he's got more talent than he has ever had to work with. Want to get your thoughts on this? 1-800-956-7266. That's 1-800-956-7266 is the telephone number. Take your calls when we come back.
your flat feet on the ground. When I said let me say it one more time, y'all.
1-800-956-7266. That is the phone number. I'm going to take your thoughts on the Mark Kingston to South Carolina reports in just a minute. But, Pro, looking through just my timeline here on Twitter, you can hit me up at Rickson Lane as we go throughout the evening if you want to get your thoughts on the program. And I'm looking here at a story coming out of Utah. And you want to talk about rivalries? Some people around here get real defensive at times about how important the Carolina-Clemson rivalry is. Utah-BYU is so intense. Get this, the Utah Utes, they're switching their official beverage from Coke to Pepsi. Pepsi, without Utah asking them, is taking their blue background off of all their signage because it too closely resembles BYU's.
Interesting.
That's not something brands typically do. And again, the college did not ask them to do this. Pepsi did this without the request coming from Utah.
Well, I think they're trying to make some more sales because haven't this rivalry been on a hiatus for a few years when BYU went independent and tried to put together a national schedule, and I think they dropped the Utes off the schedule. But now they're going to – I don't think it got to the point where they had to have the state legislature make them
That's
play
true.
again.
That's true. Carolina Clemson, they do have that on most rivalries. Yeah, the politicians have rarely gotten involved in college rivalries. So we do have that going here in the Palmetto State. 800-956-7266 on the phone lines or on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Let's go ahead and get to the phone lines as we open them up for Mark Kingston to South Carolina. Dr. Tiger is with us from Myrtle Beach. Dr. Tiger, go ahead.
Hello, fellas. How are you doing today?
Doing well.
Good. I don't think that, the AD there at Carolina has really done what he wanted to do. I think he was a great baseball coach, but as far as hiring, I think he fell short. I think it happened with Muschamp. He didn't get who he wanted to get. He got basically who was left over when people didn't want the job, and he's kind of a mediocre hire at best. And now, again, I think he had eyes on bigger fish, but either nobody wanted the job because of the stigma that's attached to it in Columbia I don't know if it's the meddling with the Board of Trustees over the years, or there's some reason why they're not attracting people they want to get there, and they wind up having to settle for people that were left over.
Well, the key to hiring is not getting the guy you want. The key to hiring is getting the guy you need. And sometimes when you search around, you get a feeler on things. Here's the key to South Carolina. Muschamp, if somebody would have looked at that roster last year and say, can that team even win 3 games last year? Nobody would have said no. But what you have is you have a guy who has tremendous experience, would have been the head coach at Texas if he was stayed there, and he was the coach in waiting under Mac Brown, went to Florida, has extensive resume as a tremendous defensive coach, has been in the NFL, and is a tremendous recruiter. You talk to any South Carolina fan, and they'll tell you, well, Muschamp, hey, I'm sold from what I've seen. And it's only been 1 year. As far as the baseball team is concerned, I think Ray Tanner does his homework. You shoot for the moon. If you don't get the moon, you find the guy's the proper fit. Now, you say you want the guy O'Sullivan from Florida. He comes here off a national championship. Suppose he's not the right fit. He's not going to win here. So sometimes what you want is not what you need. And I think, give the guy some time. You're making a statement over a guy who hasn't even coached one pitch yet. So we don't know yet.
Well, and keep in mind, too, Kevin O'Sullivan, if he comes to South Carolina off a national championship at Florida, you mentioned it before we got on Air Pro, that's a big name in the world of college baseball. Maybe coaching under another big name in Ray Tanner, maybe that's not something that's the most appealing idea to Kevin O'Sullivan.
There you go. And as I said before, where was O'Sullivan a head coach before he came to Florida? Answer, 0. He was an assistant at Clemson. So you don't never know what you hire till you put them in. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, best hire in the world I've ever seen is when Duke University went to Army and hired a losing coach in 1980. And guess what? He's still there. And that was Mike Krzyzewski. So you never know. You gotta give people a chance. Dr. Tiger, I kind of figured why your name is that.
You said it, not me. But if you look at the reaction to this hire around the world of college baseball, especially the folks down in the Tampa area that have covered that South Florida program, to a man, they're all saying huge loss for South Florida. This is a guy that we thought was gonna take this program places. All the national writers, seen Aaron Fitt talk about it, seen Kendall Rogers talk about it. Huge get for South Carolina. I mean, these are guys that have either been closely watching that program or closely watching this coach for a long time, and pretty much all of them are saying Carolina got it. They've got a guy that their program is going to be better because they brought him into Columbia. So, Dr. Carter, we appreciate the phone call, but to say that Ray Tanner's failed at what he's trying to do based off of the Muschamp hire and the Kingston hire, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. I think the Muschamp hire looks a lot better now that he's actually coached some games. We can see if we'll say the same thing about the Mark Kingston hire once he gets a team out onto the diamond. Back to the phone lines we go, 1-800-956-7266. That is the telephone number. John in Hilton Head, go ahead.
Hey, fellas, your opening coming in there about the logic and the analysis that Ray Tanner used, I think you're right on. I agree with you. Now, whether or not this guy's going to come in and go to the World Series the first year or not, it won't be fair to judge anybody on 1 year. But obviously, he knows a lot more about what's a good fit for Carolina baseball than anybody else knows. And if he's comfortable with the man, then I'm comfortable with the decision. Clemson fans, by the way, have always been jealous of Carolina. They win the national championship in football, and they still can't help it. They're still jealous of anything that goes on with Carolina as far as getting in the news and making decisions and hiring coaches. So you fellas have a good evening. I enjoy your show very much.
Appreciate it, John. Appreciate the phone call. And, I think that it goes back to what we said in the opening about, if Ray Tanner identifies you as a coach worthy of leading a program the caliber of South Carolina, then I think you have to take that. If you're the fan base, I think you have to take that under advisement and say, hey, this guy, he knows better than anybody else. And until this is proven wrong on the field, which it very well may, you never know, but until it's proven wrong on the field, I think the least the fans can do is give the guy a chance. Just a chance to get this program back to where it can be. Now, that does not mean 3 straight trips to the national championship.
No.
That's abnormal. That doesn't happen. But back where you're competing in the NCAA tournament on a consistent basis, back where you're fighting for super regional berths year in, year out. I don't think that is above and beyond the capacity for the South Carolina program. And if you look at Kingston's record in the NCAA tournament, you look at what he did in South Florida, and people are talking about, well, he's never been out of the NCAA regionals. Yeah, at Illinois State and South Florida. At South Florida, twice in 3 years, he ran into Florida, a national seed in Gainesville. So, I mean, yeah, okay, he's never been out of the regional, but you have to consider the team he took there.
Well, I'll tell you another coach who never was out of the regional, never got out of the regional till he came to South Carolina. That was Ray Tanner.
That's right.
Never got out of regionals in Raleigh. I think he did a little bit better here.
Slightly better. 1-800-956-7266. That is the telephone number. We will continue to take your calls throughout the evening. I know a lot of people very interested in the reports. Again, nothing official coming from the university yet, but Mark Kingston reportedly leaving Tampa, leaving South Florida, and heading to South Carolina. Good news for him. He won't have to throw it in his wardrobe. Weather's about the same, humidity-wise at least. A few less palm trees. You can reach us via the telephone line 800-956-7266 or find us on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. We will continue to talk to you throughout the night about the news of Mark Kingston reportedly coming to South Carolina. But right now we go to the phone lines and bring in our first guest of the evening. He is a writer for TigerNet.com. His name is David Hood, and he's coming to us from Beaverton, Oregon, where the Nike opening is going on. David, how's that West Coast weather treating you?
You know what? We got up this morning and it was 48 degrees, and I think it's about 81 right now. Not a cloud in the sky, so you know, I can handle this. There's been a nice breeze all day. I keep walking around going, yeah, I could live here, I think.
Now, for those that aren't familiar, the opening has become a really big event in the world of recruiting and for people that follow recruiting. But for those that maybe aren't familiar with what's going on up in Oregon this week, paint a picture for what the scene is up there right now.
Well, so the opening is where Nike, they hold different combines across the country. They have them in places like Miami and Columbus, Ohio, and Atlanta and Charlotte. And these high school prospects go and they compete, and 166 of the nation's best are brought here, covering all positions. Part of that's going to be the Elite 11 quarterback competition. You're going to have a lineman competition. And it basically is a chance for those 166 to prove maybe they're the best at their position in the country. So, you know, we went out this morning, and this morning was quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers. And we watched 2 hours of practice and did some interviews. And it's just incredible the amount of talent that's on hand here.
Talking to David Hood of TigerNet.com. Now, when you talk about quarterbacks, obviously the name Trevor Lawrence is on the lips of all Clemson fans. What have you seen from him so far at the opening?
You know, he had, I think, two passes that just weren't very good out of all the ones he threw today. He was on target. We watched him in Charlotte, and I thought he was a little bit off in Charlotte. And it turned out he had a foot injury that he really was trying to baby and hadn't been throwing a lot. But today he told me he was healthy, and he looked the part. And, you know, he's over there throwing with the wide receivers, and the ball's just thumping into their hands. And, you know, it's almost like you're watching a major league batting practice, and you know, you hear him say, boy, you know, the ball just sounds different coming off this guy's bat. Well, it just sounds different when the receivers catch it when Trevor's throwing. You know, he's got incredible velocity, but then even on the, you know, the short and intermediate routes, he showed touch, and you know, he's still able to throw the deep ball. He's got it all. There's no doubt about it.
You know, when you look at that type of competition in your years of watching football, just in your opinion and looking at it, what can the quarterback take from this type of competition and bring to the field that will help him in, you know, when they really start to get into battle?
You know, one of the things that they were doing this morning was they were drawing up plays on a board out there, and there was different terminology for these quarterbacks to look at, and then they had to, you know, take that terminology and put it into action into a play. And it was kind of fun watching the coaches draw up a play, use new terminology, and then expect the quarterbacks to go out. So it teaches them, I think, to adapt and adjust and be able to think on the fly. And I talked to Trevor afterwards, and he said that was great, that it was, you know, he's learning stuff that's outside of his normal high school offense, and it's just stuff he can take and get better.
You know, the interesting thing is when you look at a lot of the quarterbacks, especially the young ones, they want to make quick decisions, and they see a guy coming open and they throw it. But, David, they forget about the footwork. And is that a real key to this type of instruction to teach them, yeah, make the quick decision, but that ball to get there faster, more accurate if you get your steps and your footwork down?
Yeah, I was actually just amazed. This is my first time coming out here to this, the kind of instruction that they were getting. Even the wide receivers, you know, and they were stressing, you know, the way your feet move, where your hands are. There were guys out there saying, hey, if I'm a cornerback, I can cover you because I'm reading the wide receiver here. I know, you know, as soon as you're 4 steps in that this is not going to be a fade, and I can stay in my back pedal. And with the quarterbacks, it was the same thing. You know, make sure that when you're on the drop that you're still on the balls of your feet, you know, that you're on your toes. Make sure that your arm's in a ready position. Make sure you scan in the field. And then they're kind of throwing things at them really fast, but still trying to hold them to the footwork.
Talking to David Hood, senior writer for TigerNet.com. David, you talk about the instruction that all the players are receiving and going back to Trevor Lawrence and kind of what you've seen from him. The opening often boasts about all the instructors they have, all the high-name instructors. Is there anyone particular you've seen him maybe interact with more than other instructors that are out there right now?
No, he took some instruction from a guy named Deshaun Watson a little bit out there today. That he might be replacing in another year or so at Clemson. But, all of those coaches out there are just really hands-on. And it was fun to watch Jerry Rice, the San Francisco 49ers great, working not only with receivers, but taking time to talk to a guy like Trevor Lawrence, to go over to the tight ends, to talk to the quarterbacks. Because when Jerry Rice approaches you listen. You listen to what he has to say, and it's just kind of fun watching him go out there and talk to everybody.
How's Trevor's hair holding up?
Oh, no.
It looked good. It had good bounce to it today with the breeze. There was good body in there. I think he's done well with it.
Well, I know the Clemson fans are excited. One of the reasons you're out there is not only to look at Lawrence, but other targets and commits out there. What you can tell us about the other guys who have either the Tigers on their board or already on the Tigers board?
Well, there's, with it just being the wide receivers and quarterbacks today, it was just Trevor on the quarterback side, and then there were 3 wide receivers. Justin Ross, who's out of Alabama, who has Clemson in his final 5. Brennan Eagles, who's another kid that, Clemson's kind of high on his list, and then Jordan Adams. Jordan Adams is a kid out of North Carolina. He'll make a decision this week between Clemson and North Carolina. He's a 2-sport star. Watching him out there, man, just smooth, I guess is the one word that comes to mind. But he told us that North Carolina has more of a family atmosphere than Clemson, which may give a glimpse as to, what his decision is going to be a little bit later this week.
Well, it's interesting why we got you here. Obviously, number 4 is gone. And I know Clemson fans will be interested in watching Texans games this year when he plays at the next level. But as far as you get a feel of what they're doing with the offense, obviously you hear Dabo say the offense won't change, but do you have a feeling that at least early on they're going to see what they have in the running game to sort of take the pressure off a quarterback that doesn't have the experience?
I do. I mean, they've got a good offensive line coming back. They've got, a good stable. I don't know that they have a great back in there yet. Tavian Feaster maybe has potential. Haven't seen it yet, and I think they are. I think they're gonna ride that running game. And if Kelly Bryant's quarterback, I think that just makes sense because we know how dangerous he can be with his feet. They're going to go out there and try and establish the run right away. It's something Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott have both talked about for years, that they want to be, the type of offense that can run the football consistently. And even though they've had flashes of it over the past 2 or 3 years, you get out there against an Alabama or somebody like that, and it's tough going. And, they haven't had a whole lot of success, and I think they want to change that.
Senior writer for TigerNet.com, David Hood, with us. David, quickly before we let you go, the other prominent Tiger commitment out in Oregon right now is Xavier Thomas. When does he hit the field, and what's the buzz surrounding him?
Yeah, he'll get going Saturday and Sunday. So when he checks in, hopefully we'll be able to get a whole lot more out of him. But I was, listening to people talking around there this morning, and this is actually a really good lineman class that they have coming in with Xavier Thomas, and then on the offensive side, they've got guys like Jamari Sawyer and Jackson Carman, guys from across the country. And watching some of these, defensive linemen against offensive lineman battles, man, it's going to be fun. I can't wait to get all that going.
That is David Hood live from high school football Nirvana, the opening out in Beaverton, Oregon. David, enjoy your time out there. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
Mike Morgan going to join us, talk some more college baseball on the other side at Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network. Got a former Gamecock outfielder Jake Williams joining us at 7:15. He's got a big project to discuss. We'll talk to him. Also talk to him about the Gamecock baseball program. We'll continue to take your calls in hour number 2, 800-956-7266. Thanks to David Hood from TigerNet.com for joining us in the last segment from the opening in Beaverton, Oregon. Right now we go back out to the phone line for our next guest. He has seen it all and called it all. Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Braves, and now doing football, basketball, and baseball for ESPN and the SEC Network. And he's somewhat familiar with the name that is reportedly coming to Columbia. His name is Mike Morgan. And Mike, what was your initial reaction when you heard the reports that Mark Kingston was going to become the new baseball coach at South Carolina?
Good to talk to you, Rickson. I would say it was less than surprised. Only from the standpoint, started hearing that name a while ago, and ironically enough, 2 out of the last 3 years, I've been in Gainesville doing the regionals, and both times USF was there with Mark Kingston. So I've gotten to know him fairly well. Was very impressed with the job he's done there. He has that wow factor. When you talk to him, you can understand why he can be a great recruiter and has been a great recruiter wherever he goes. Knows the game, seasoned, polished, and was ready for a bigger job. At that point, 3 weeks ago, when I talked to him, I didn't know that bigger job would be South Carolina, but the more I kind of looked at this job search, it made sense that would be a prime candidate. So not shocked that he wound up getting it. It was just a matter of time before he would get a marquee job, and I think it's a good fit for South Carolina.
Now, for Gamecock fans who maybe aren't as familiar with his work down at South Florida, you were able to see him twice in the postseason. The 2 times he took the Bulls to the postseason. From a style standpoint, what kind of baseball should South Carolina fans expect under Mark Kingston?
Well, I think it's going to start with his recruiting. He was able to get a lot of really talented arms. First of all, he had Kevin Merrill, who was recently a first-round draft pick, a middle infielder, and then that rotation, if they didn't have a rain delay which cut short a guy who's about to be a first-round pick in another year or so, that wiped him out, that burned him out. And so they had a really good opportunity to upset Florida in that regional. It would not have shocked me if they did. And if they did, you would have seen a rotation and pitching depth that very few teams from that caliber of conference have. So he's going to attract big time recruits. That combined with the fact that South Carolina is their program with premier facilities and tradition, he'll be able to cash in on that much more so than at USF. And I think the style will be very similar to what you've seen, which is what you have to do to win nowadays. You have to have great pitching depth, and you have to have a lineup that can produce runs, not just with home runs, but particularly when you get to Omaha. As we saw with that Florida team, you have to be able to bunch hits together and score in other ways. I think the Gators hit 222 in that World Series and won a national championship. So the day and age of just hitting 3-run homers and winning titles is probably done.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, Mike. We talked about mentality, what would Ray would be looking for in a coach. And in my mind, of course, you're going to hear the moans from some fans who want to win the press conference. But when you look at a guy who has been where he's been, has been successful, and he wants to carve out his own niche, and he's right at the precipice, and this is his first Power 5 job. You almost want to, in my mind, in this day and age when it's so tough to make even a regional, that you want a guy, maybe you want him a little established, but that hunger factor is the key. The hunger factor, I think, outweighs that.
It's a great point. Let me address it. And I've been saying this on your show now for several weeks, if not months. The whole notion, and I'm going to repeat myself from 6 weeks ago, that you're just going to go out there and poach an established coach at a premier school that's already going to World Series is ridiculous. Just as the next South Carolina coach, and I believe Mark Kingston will be very successful in Columbia, when he is, another Power 5 school is not going to be able to call up and say, we're going to take you away because we're going to offer you an extra $300,000 a year. It doesn't work that way. So some of the names that were being thrown out there, it's just people throwing darts at a board and hoping to hit something that sticks. Schlossnagle was never leaving TCU. You weren't going to get O'Connor. You weren't going to get McDonald. You weren't going to get Monty Lee. I mean, there's so many names that didn't make sense to me when I was hearing all that go through. Anybody know who David Pierce is? He's the coach of the University of Texas. Texas has more tradition than anybody in the sport. They didn't just go and poach the top coach in the country. How many people knew who Paul Maneri was when LSU hired him? I mean, LSU was coming off of 5 national titles. Paul Maneri had a little bit of success at Notre Dame, but he was hardly a household name. You have to be a little more creative as an AD. You can't just go out there and get whoever you want, even if you are Ray Tanner in South Carolina. And keep this in mind too: whoever gets that job or got the job in this case, until you win that 3rd national title, you haven't lived up to the guy who basically put the program at an elite level. So that goes through a coach's mind too. The expectation level is mighty strong in Columbia, and justifiably so. So there's a lot of coaches that are pretty cozy where they are, making great money at a great school. Maybe you don't get 7,000 a game. Maybe your facilities aren't quite to the level of South Carolina, but that doesn't mean you jump ship. So I think Ray, obviously, you know you got a guy who is interested in the job. Maybe you throw out a few more feelers to some bigger names, and that's kind of a long shot, perhaps. I understand Kevin O'Sullivan. There might have been a unique personal situation that went above and beyond one job versus another. But at the end of the day, very often you have to be a little more creative than that. I think this is a creative hire, and a guy that one more good year at USF, and he would have been probably the top coaching candidate in the country in terms of a guy coming from a non-Power 5 school.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to ESPN's Mike Morgan. And Mike, you said expectations in that answer, and that was a discussion that a lot of fans and a lot of media members had this past season for the Gamecock program, is what were the expectations for the season and for the program. Obviously, for Mark Kingston, there are going to be different expectations than there were at Illinois State and South Florida. In your mind, what is a reasonable expectation for this Gamecock baseball program moving forward?
Another great question. I think the very best programs out there, South Carolina and LSU, Louisville now. I think you have to put Louisville in that discussion now. Maybe you didn't do that before. And, of course, there's programs on the left coast, too. You don't want to count them out, Texas, so on. It's nice to think that you're going to go to Omaha every year, but you're kidding yourself if you think that's true. I think for a South Carolina, look, you should be in the tournament just about every year. Maybe 9 out of 10 you had one off year. Obviously, missing it 2 out of 3 is unacceptable, and I don't anticipate that happening again anytime soon. But Omaha itself, I mean, if you can get to Omaha 2 out of 5 years, that's an accomplishment. I don't care who you are. That is something you brag about. You don't stick your nose up at it. And you hope once you get to Omaha, you get hot and you win some games. And obviously Ray Tanner was able to do that. A lot of other great coaches have not been able to do that. But I think Mark Kingston's a guy that'll be up for the challenge. This is not a guy who is going to be overwhelmed by the circumstances. He was with a national championship team as an assistant at Miami. He was with a World Series team at Tulane. He took 2 different schools to the NCAA tournament that hadn't been there in forever. That tells me the guy can take almost any situation and make it better, and that's what I envision he will do at South Carolina.
Well, just in the few seconds we have left, how much guts did it take for Sully to go to that bullpen and bring in who we thought was going to be the Game 3 starter to shut things down with runners on first and third and 1 out?
A ton. But, sometimes that's what great coaches do. You go all in, you get second-guessed if you get it wrong, but you get a chance to win it all if you get it right.
That is Mike Morgan. We appreciate your time, Mike. Hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good, guys. Be good.
9 out of 10 NCAA tournaments pro is not bad.
Not bad at all. And, of course, he's always had the pitching, because that team only hit about 220 during the postseason to the Gators, but it was enough to win it all.
Hour number 2 coming up.
stop now. More sports talk is on its way. Listen to the final word in sports all across the state with your host, Phil Kornblut.
Not tonight. Corn on a well-deserved vacation, so Rickson Lane filling in for him along with the Professor Tom Hayes. This is Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network. Good to have you join us. Our thanks to David Hood and Mike Morgan for joining us in hour number one. Hour number two, going to have former Gamecock outfielder Jake Williams with us at 7:20. Also have some Frank Martin sound for you at 7:45 as the Gamecocks officially introduced a new coach today. It was just for the men's basketball program. Assistant Chuck Martin officially brought in front of the fans and media this afternoon over in Colonial Life Arena. Of course, the big news today, the reports that Mark Kingston, Williams-Brice, pardon me, it was over there. He'll be in Colonial Life Arena eventually.
He'll make his way down there. Williams-Brice today, Colonial Life tomorrow.
And they got some new digs in the old Coliseum, which they refashioned into the new coaches' offices there.
So Chuck Martin he's getting the lay of the land. Is that better? He's slowly making his way towards Colonial Life Arena.
There we go.
As the new assistant coach for the South Carolina Gamecocks. We will hear from Frank Martin regarding the new hire at 7:45. Right now, it is time for the recruiting report. Defensive back Jermaine McMillan of Miami is recently named his top 6. South Carolina, Temple, Baylor, NC State, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. These 6 schools McMillan has named. He's not yet been to South Carolina, but he plans to visit for the Prospect Social event. That's on July 22nd. He's being recruited by Travaris Robinson. He's made a strong push for McMillan, and McMillan has rewarded that interest from Robinson and the Gamecock coaching staff by putting South Carolina on his short list. He has not taken any visits thus far, but he does plan to visit all the schools on his short list in July. At the moment, does not have a favorite, but he says he would like to make his decision in mid-August, so before high school football season gets underway. We're seeing that more and more with kids now, where they're trying to get this whole circus done before they get into their senior year. I completely understand that, and I got to imagine their coaches probably like it too.
Well, the key point is, though, because they have not signed on the dotted line, people will tell you when a guy commits, that only tells the other schools who the enemy is now.
That's right.
And so it'll be interesting. I think they just feel like they have to have a dance partner, but once they get to the prom, if they see something prettier, they'll go after it.
There's nothing binding about that verbal commitment. It doesn't mean a thing till you get that fax with the NLI. Also, in the recruiting report, 2019 wide receiver Dominic Blaylock of Marietta, Georgia. He is down to Clemson, Georgia, and Auburn. He is also planning on making a decision in August. So the Tigers, Bulldogs, and the Auburn Tigers competing for the services of Dominic Blaylock. And Ben Lippen linebacker Kyle Wright, he is named his top 7. Appalachian State, Navy, Temple, Georgia State, East Carolina, Purdue, and Colorado, the top 7 for Kyle Wright, the linebacker from Ben Lippen. So Sean Elliott got an opportunity to pick up a Palmetto State prospect as Georgia State is in the top 7. He's made some real inroads into the former Gamecock players that are maybe moving on from Columbia, and also recruiting the state of South Carolina, trying to build that Georgia State program back up.
Well, that's the key. I-20, and as I think it was Steve Spurrier once said that, look, kids like to get away from home, but not too far.
That's right.
A nice little 3.5, 4-hour drive, Atlanta down I-20. Great place to go to school. But that means that pipeline can run in the other direction too.
Just far enough so mom and dad have to think about whether they really want to get in the car or not. That's all. You just want them to have the conversation. That's all it is. And Sean Elliott working the Palmetto State as he attempts to get the Georgia State Panthers on a winning track. I said build that program back up. That program's really never been up. He's building it from the ground up, essentially. When you talk about college football jobs, Georgia State, in terms of where they are in the region, there's plenty of athletes around them, but when you look at the teams they have to compete with, and the fact that, like we said, that they don't really have a history to build off of, he's taken, in my mind, one of the more difficult building jobs in college football.
Well, the key point is you got to sell Atlanta. And not only Atlanta as a place where a lot of things go on, but a place when you graduate, you pretty much, if you don't want a job, you won't find one, but you could find a job in Atlanta and all type of internships, that sort of thing. And as a matter of fact, I think they've voted and they've got the funding to reconfigure the Braves' old Olympic Stadium. And so I think they're going to use that for their venue. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that, competing against, of course, Georgia down the road and, of course, Georgia Tech just down the street.
1-800-956-7266. That is the telephone number. You can also find us on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. Got a text in during the first hour. Scott writes in, curious to see what happens with the South Carolina baseball staff if there are any holdovers. That's something we haven't talked about yet. If the Mark Kingston reports come to fruition and he comes to Columbia, does anyone on that Gamecock staff remain? Because he's got a right-hand man in his pitching coach in Billy Mole, who you would imagine, if he doesn't get the USF job, Mark Kingston would love to bring him to Columbia with him because they had one of the dominant pitching staffs in all of college baseball last season.
Yeah, and of course, the key point is, let's face it, if you want to step up as an assistant, South Carolina is a good springing point for you. So he would love to take his pitching coach, but, leave that calendar open for some interviews of some top assistants who may want to come with him. So it'd be interesting to see how slowly he puts it or quickly he puts his staff together, because, of course, having ties in Illinois, New Orleans area, that sort of thing, he may want to just stretch his tentacles recruiting, especially for pitching. If you're in South Carolina, which is talent rich, and then you establish yourself down in Florida, you always want to get the feel that maybe you can stretch your territory a little bit more, especially if you're looking for prime pitching.
And their pitching staff last year, 10.1 strikeouts per 9 innings. That led all of college baseball. South Carolina was up there. They were 11th in the country, but South Florida was the team ahead of everyone else. And, you talk about recruiting and Mark Kingston, and I've seen some people talking about the worry maybe that, okay, South Carolina's gone down this path before. They've gone down the great recruiter path with Chad Holbrook. Well, the difference obviously is that Mark Kingston's got head coaching experience, and you look at Kingston, what the recruits that he's pulled into schools like South Florida, which, as we talked about, it's kind of the same thing with Georgia State. There's lots of talent around you. That doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it. You're competing against Florida, Miami, Florida State, and, oh, by the way, every other college baseball program in the Southeast that wants to go down to Florida and get some of those players out of the Sunshine State. He had the 9th-ranked class in America in 2015 off that first NCAA regional, according to Collegiate Baseball. So this is a guy who's proven I can bring in players to a program that maybe was not their dream school. Now he gets to come to South Carolina, where you have to imagine the recruiting is going to be – there's going to be a wider net that he can cast in terms of players that he can entice to come to Columbia and come to Carolina Stadium.
Certainly, and of course he plays in a state where high school baseball is very important. And so he can find some talent here. It'd be interesting. I would think probably being the coach he is, he's going to try to develop as much rapport with the high school coaching community here in South Carolina and tell them how it actually elevate their importance. Because let's face it, we were talking to the former state columnist last night, and Ron Morris, and he was right when he said this. When South Carolina, even just a few years ago, won 2 championships, you had a handful of teams, maybe just a few, that could win in Omaha. Now everybody is really putting a strong emphasis on baseball, and there's a ton of teams out there can win it. And, of course, when you can see a team like Coastal Carolina put it together and win one, it's tough out there right now as far as just making the tournament.
Save your tweets. I know it's not Carolina Stadium anymore. It's Founders Park or whatever the heck they've named it. It's Carolina Stadium forever. I don't care how much money they paid for it. Former Gamecock outfitter Jake Williams going to join us next. Got a big project. We'll talk to him about his memories in Founders Park. 1-800-956-7266. That is the telephone number. You can also tweet us at SportsTalkSC on Twitter. Rickson Lane, the Professor Tom Hayes, and now former Gamecock outfielder Jake Williams joins us in studio live on Sports Talk.
Thank you guys for having me.
Appreciate you being here, man. Now you've got what I think, and I think Gamecock fans are going to be real excited to hear about. Tell them about this big project that you've got going on.
I think so too. So I've started to get a little hype going around it social media wise, but for Gamecock fans out there, I'm going back and in a sports documentary style film telling the story of our specific 2011 national championship, but also we'll be touching on both championships. I've got full cooperation with the university, Coach Tanner, and all my ex-teammates. It's the sort of thing where I'm tracking down guys to see who's done what since these championships, and it's also telling the stories of that team, and it's also there's a lot of points about what led guys to USC that we're touching on as well, which is there's some really cool connections.
Now, you were a member of that 2011 national championship team. When did the idea, and because we were talking about it before the segment, and I'm surprised no one has done something like this yet. I mean, it's been 6-7 years. Exactly. When did the idea come to you? Hey, this is something that people would want to see a documentary about this team.
Well, I was telling you guys off camera here that the idea initially spun sort of from, this was right about the time new iPhones were coming out with cool videos, and you could just pretty easily pop it on your phone. But actually my degree from the school is in visual communications, where I was trained in design, photography, videography, which is just another reason they've taken to the idea even more, that they have not only an ex-player creating this, but he's also a trained videographer from the school that he's telling the story of the school. So they're way into it. But so basically the idea spun from me having just amazing cell phone footage of different periods throughout the season, everything from locker rooms to bus rides to, winning after we won the whole thing, we got the bus rides and Coach Tanner's post-game speech, and it's all raw footage. That I said, man, something should be done with this stuff. And not only me, but all my teammates have stuff too. That it's an inside look to the team that you would never see elsewhere. That you'd never be able to see what's happening on the bus after a team wins a national championship, or what their coach says to them. And Coach Tanner's forgiven me at this point, but it's sort of instinctually, I kind of just snuck my phone up when he was giving us our post-game speech, and obviously paying attention, but I had my phone here on my hip. And it's going to be golden footage. So it's just all this stuff. And again, like you said, 5-6 years has gone by. No one's told the story in the light that I want to. And so I figured, why not me do it? I'll do it.
Now tell me this, when you started to develop the project, if you like me, and I used to do video projects, you start off and you have an outline and everything, and then suddenly you see the footage and you just tear that up.
That's so true. That's happened numerous times at this point already. And it's been fun. At this point, I've already gone down to track 5-6 teammates to interview them already, and I plan to do another 5-6 with Coach Tanner as well, and perhaps a couple other guys. But I've gone now to Reno, where Michael Roth was playing against Christian Walker in AAA, where we had a blast there. I interviewed both of them together at one point and separately, with a great scene with the city of Reno and the field and snowtop mountains, and then shot over to New Orleans after that and got Peter Mooney, who's in AAA as well. Got him there. Then just a couple weeks ago, I shot up to Boston, where I got Jackie literally on the field in front of the first base dugout with the green monster in our background. Just golden footage, where, like you said, time in and time again, my ideas have shifted. Already talking to these guys, new ideas are forming. We're getting a better picture of, better overall picture. Because I've got my story, but what I've been telling the guys too is it's not my story, it's all of our stories, and really anyone who's associated with the program. And I'm just telling it in a really unique sort of way.
And of course, the uniqueness of South Carolina, they can't be repeated, is the fact that they won about 21 games in a row after that first loss to Georgia Tech, I think.
Right.
But the key is you won the 2010 championship and closed down Rosenblatt and then opened up
a tale that will
Ameritrade.
never be done again.
Mhm.
It's a completely unique thing. You know, and this team it's again, we still hold many records. That 22 game, that's still held. So aside from this being literally one of the greatest college baseball teams of all time, there's also just such juice to these individual stories of these guys and what led to USC. I mean, I was a local boy, so I grew up in Greenville, where I played high school ball with Michael Roth, Kyle Enders. I played AAU baseball with Scott Wingo. We were all friends. We were all around each other all the time. So then ultimately, and in high school, winning state championships, AAU championships all together. Then we all find our way back to USC where we win more championships. So, and that's just, there's cool connections leading. And then of course the story within, and then post the championships, a big chunk of what I'm telling is what these guys have gone on to do since. And there's some guys, I mean, the stories are vast. I mean, we've got guys who are in the big leagues now, guys who are still playing that are trying to still fight for the big leagues. We've got Robert Berry, who's a police officer in town here, who's just been on Live PD. I don't know if you guys have heard about that show on A&E. They have a new cop show where it's like literal live footage from these cops and the calls they get. And he was just on that show.
Oh, okay.
On A&E, kind of crazy.
Wasn't Robert Berry the guy who threw out the Florida runner at the plate? Was he?
Well, no. Well, I threw out.
He was involved too.
Oh yeah,
he was there too.
He caught the ball.
That's true.
Yeah, he caught the ball. Yeah, I do. I was thinking. I said, hey, but you know, the interesting thing about a story like this, and I think the fans would try to pinpoint it, is because you can bring all the best talent in the world on a team, and the groceries just don't mix.
No,
something happens.
That's right.
But this team had an aura about them once they had success that you don't want to call it arrogance, but it almost like when they walked on the field, you looked at your opponents and say, "Welcome to my office."
Exactly right.
You're in my office now. How did that come about?
You know, one of the big themes of the film, we're kind of touching on it, and for the first part of what you said, is that winning recipe. Like, what does it take to win 2 national championships in a row? Because we're playing against loaded teams with all the talent in the world. Like you said, I mean, every team we're playing, and you guys were just talking about before, and now it's not just a few schools, it's any school is going to be able to beat you now. So what is the winning recipe? Like, what does it take? What's the difference between us and some other team that was stacked with first rounders and, you know, that should have been there over us or something like that? And it's been really cool to hear the individual answers from the guys I've interviewed already. To me, there's a lot to that. The first thing that comes to mind, which I kind of joke with the people, is 2010 was the first year that they implemented team yoga. All right. Never done that on a team at all. Namaste. And it was just a funny thing that we just started doing this team yoga. And it was about stretching, but it was just more of another thing about being together as a team. And we go on to win a national championship. And again, the next year we do team yoga again and go on to win. That was just kind of a joke. Like, not yoga didn't win us a national championship, but who knows? I mean, there's these little things. And to go forward with that, I think within that recipe and what it takes is there's so many things. And that team, why did we bond so well together? I think it's plenty of things. Doing off-field stuff all the time together. We ate dinners together. We were more family and oriented than anything. And another thing too is we were a group of guys that there was that sort of arrogance on the field, but off the field there was none of that. We basically good guys, good recipe. Tune in for more.
Jake Williams will be back with us next segment on Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
What about smoke?
Back with former Gamecock outfielder Jake Williams. Talked to this guy all day. Fortunate and kind enough for him to stick with us for another segment. Jake, you were talking in the last segment about all the places you've gone. You've traveled to do this documentary on the 2011 National Championship team. You've traveled to Reno and to Boston. A lot of people have had ideas about chronicling championship teams, but you got to spend a little bit of money to be able to make this happen. How have you been able to fund this project, which has taken you all over the country?
Right. Yeah. Well, and this isn't something that I just overnight have put together. This has been now almost a year's collective of work where, Ray Tanner and I and his assistant, we've sent probably 300-400 emails. This isn't just a chump production we're trying to throw together. I mean, we're going to give it the attention and money and proper, it's proper. We're going to make it proper is what I'm trying to say. The team is one of the greatest teams ever. So we're going to make a film to properly commemorate them. But the funding we've like I said, I have Ray Tanner on my side. He's into the project. The university's into the project. And we've gone to private donors at this point to buy into the project with me. So guys who are normally giving to the university anyways, we've approached, with this unique opportunity for them to buy into something that will never happen again, a film that will, that a once in a lifetime type thing. So
I've got a million questions. We've only got one more segment with you. So I want to do some here. I want to run through this real quickly because I'm looking at this roster of this 2011 team and just the characters on this roster. I mean, if people don't remember this 2011 team, it's a shame because y'all had some amazing baseball players. You had some out there guys on this team as well. So
and to chime in real quick, that was part of that winning recipe too. The guys themselves. I mean, it's the characters on the team. It's the molding together. But go ahead. So without, I don't want you to give away anything that's going to show up in the documentary. But if you can, if I can give you a name, if you could just give me either a quick best story or a quick best memory you have of some of the guys on this team. Michael Roth. My first memory is of Michael as a 14-year-old in high school.
Was he still trying to play first base back then too?
He was. He was an All-American first baseman, actually. So believe it or not, but now he's a big league pitcher. But
it worked out for him.
Yeah, Anyways, go ahead. Next.
See, I'm trying to find where's he? Brian Harper.
Ooh, character indeed. West Coast vibe. His brother actually came. I think that was maybe the year his brother got drafted.
It's worked out for Bryce too, by the way.
Yeah. So his brother came in at one point. I remember the little story, and he was just an 18-year-old, kind of in this college environment, way out of place. But his brother Brian was taking him under his arm, showing him around, and he, this is a now multi-millionaire, right? 18-year-old. But yeah, that was a good one.
Matt Price.
Oh, Matt Price. He and I. One of my favorite things about him is, you talk about shenanigans and creating environments for the team. John Taylor and I, and we'd sub one guy in each time as well. Every day before every game, we'd stretch. Everyone's stretching. The position players would stretch, and the pitchers would stretch. And then they were pitchers, so we'd all do a little stretch ourselves after, just the 3 or 4 of us, where we'd do silly stuff. We're doing leapfrogging over each other. And another thing about Matt is he and I, we do the little huddle before we run on the field, before the game. And he and I, people are doing high fives, this, that, but we would just give a classic hug right before and then run out for the game.
Speaking of silly,
Scott, a lot of love on that team.
And it worked out for you. Speaking of silly, Scott Wingo.
Oh, man. Character through and through. Another guy I've known since I was a kid. One of the greatest guys I know. Great player, but better guy. Make you laugh in a heartbeat. One of the lives of the team. And although we had, like you said, we had a lot of life in that team.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy was Adrian Morales?
And Adrian's actually my next interview this weekend.
Don't mention that to him if you don't mind.
We're going to be seeing him in Atlanta. Just to chime into, he's got a cool story. Another story of all these guys and what they've done is he's now a coach. He's been a coach at USC. Scott Wingo's another one who came back and coached at USC. A lot of these guys have done cool stuff. He was our wild Latino guy. He had that fiery energy, and he had that good kind of crazy that you wanted him on your team.
Well, the interesting thing, you talked about that. It's almost like you had guys who were like instant pressure releasers.
Yes.
They know when to
Yes.
be loose, and they knew it was time to do business.
Exactly.
Now, we've heard Coach Tanner talk about it real intimately, that you guys taught him some stuff.
Really?
Because
That's great.
he would be uptight sometime, and he didn't like a lot of shenanigans.
No.
And then you kind of taught him that it's okay
Right.
to
Time
release
and place
that
it.
pressure,
Yeah.
especially when you can hit the field. And once you pass that dotted line, it was all business.
Tune in for the bus ride videos for that. You'll see what we mean.
Okay.
And it is crazy indeed.
When you look at your career, and I know you've said, this isn't your story, this is the team's story, but you had a heck of a story in your time at Carolina. I mean, you're involved in two of the more memorable plays of that national championship run, with the throw out against Florida, and then the 3-run homer against Clemson at Fluor Field. For people that were at that game, I still tell people it was the most electric college baseball atmosphere I've ever been in.
Really?
Was that night in Fluor Field?
Wow, that's cool.
But when you look back,
it was electric.
It was unbelievable. But when you look back at your career, obviously, take the hardware out, take the ring out of it, but what do you look back on your career with the most fondness for, in terms of what you accomplished at South Carolina?
That's tough, because there was a lot accomplished as well. One thing that it's maybe a little kind of like a little cliche, and it goes on with, I think it's maybe some of those relationships I formed with these guys. And it's been especially cool to track them all back down and to talk to these guys again after years of not seeing each other. And it be like we haven't left one day, where it's two brothers talking about the stuff we went through and having a blast with that. Memorabilia aside, winning games aside, for me, and I don't have a lot of close friends either. And especially when you're in that environment in school, you don't have like a chance to get out. You're not meeting other people per se. So if you make great friends on your team, then you're fortunate. And we all were super close, all of us. So I think maybe that's one of mine that I took away.
After leaving Carolina, people that read the story on you on Gamecocks Online a couple years ago, or a couple months ago, may remember, went to Atlanta. Then you wound up in Sweden playing baseball. I mean, what was, I know it was a year, but what was that experience like for you to experience baseball? Yeah, it's the same game, but it's this completely different culture and this completely different world. What was that like for you?
Well, it was a dream come true. To play professionally has always been a dream, and it didn't work out for me in the States. I had a few buddies who went abroad and played, and I took some time away from school, about 5 years really, from the game. And I was up in Northern California coaching a high school JV team when I was like, maybe I could still do this thing. Put myself out there to an international league, found my way to Sweden, where I not only played, but I also head coached the team in Sweden. Yeah. So, the only coaching I'd ever done too was the high school JV team at this point. Now I'm coaching a professional team in Sweden. So it was interesting to adapt to that and to try to take that on as well as play. And I hadn't played in years. So fortunately it came right back to me pretty good. And baseball in that area, really, not just Sweden, but in that entire area, it's super unknown. They don't even know what the sport is a lot of times. People are just figuring it out, and that's why they definitely want Americans to come in, bring that knowledge, passion for the game. And I had a good track record from college, so they took me in, and I did real well, and the team did real well, and it was an incredible experience, once in a lifetime type thing. And I don't think I'll play again probably, but I checked that off my list too. So very cool.
Former Gamecock outfitter Jake Williams with us. Jay, we appreciate you. Before we let you go quickly, is there a release date planned for this documentary?
Well, there's no release quite yet. We're going as we go. We're getting guys interviewed. We're going to try to release it this fall, though. We're going to try to get it out in the fall sports time at some point. We'll be able to. There'll be digital copies sold online, bookstores. We're going to get it out all over the place for you guys to see. It's going to be something special. I look forward to it. You Gamecock fans, keep following me online here and there. And we got something big coming for you.
That's Jake Williams, former Gamecock outfielder, documentary chronicling the 2011 team. Going to be a lot of fun, folks. Look forward to the fall. Back on Sports Talk live on the South Carolina Radio Network. Been a good show tonight. Busy show. Fast show. David Hood, Mike Morgan, Jake Williams, all kind enough to spend some time with us this evening. And, Pro, we were joking in the opening. On any other day, we would have led with the news coming out of the Gamecock basketball program. Chuck Martin, the new assistant coach for South Carolina, formally introduced today at Williams-Brice Stadium. You got that right, Jared?
That's right, Williams-Brice Stadium.
Boom. But obviously the baseball news overshadowing that, but Chuck Martin coming in to replace Matt Figger. Frank Martin introduced him today, and to hear Coach Frank Martin describing Coach Chuck Martin, Gamecocks got exactly the guy that they needed.
It's who we are, you know. Started as a high school coach, not a hotshot college player that became a hotshot recruiter. You know, started as a high school coach. Very humble, very, very appreciative of every day that he's given an opportunity to do what he does. I'm a high energy, let's go kind of guy. I don't do well with people that are laid back and we get there when we get there. You know, I don't deal well with that. Chuck's like that. Chuck can't wait. It's let's go, let's go, let's go. And our players are used to that. If I bring in a guy that just kind of, we're practicing, he's just kind of laid back with their feet up, they're going to freak out. They're just going, wait a second, this is not how we do things. So I think he'll be a great, great fit. I really do. I'm telling you, from the second that my mind said, call Chuck, and I called him. And from the first 5 minutes of our conversation, I said, that's who I'm hiring. And I never deviated from it. And I continued that. You guys kept asking me, and I continue to have conversations because you got to make sure. And I don't care who else I spoke with. I don't care what advice I got from people. I don't care who called me to reference someone else. Every time I hung up the phone, it was right back, Chuck's the guy. And so I'm extremely comfortable there. And here's the best part about Chuck, very humble. He's not going to show up trying to tell us how to work. On the contrary, he's going to show up and he's going to understand how we work first. See, the new guy, anytime the new guy walks in the door, whether it's a player or a coach, and he tries to tell people that are in place how to do things, the people that are doing the work are going to kind of put their hand out and say, please stop. Chuck understands that. So he's coming in and he wants to add value. And as he adds value, then his thoughts are then we're asking him for his thoughts. So then we can implement that into what we already think. That's how you grow. At least that's how my rear end thinks it should be. And then that's how you grow. And he gets that. He didn't show up here trying to tell us, hey, oh, you don't need to recruit that guy. You need to recruit the. No, he's coming here saying, who are we recruiting? What can I do? Frank, what kind of players, now that we're actually in the same locker room, what kind of players do you feel more comfortable with? What kind of people? And it's a matter of having those kind of conversations. And now as we get into this recruiting cycle,
good stuff this afternoon from Frank Martin as he talked about the hiring of Chuck Martin. He's got a soft spot for those guys, those high school guys that work their way up, because that's exactly how he did it. You can just hear it. He likes guys that kind of pulled themselves up through the ranks. I think
probably that bears out from the college basketball first state of Kansas, when he was really thrust into that starting that head coaching job at Kansas State. And you would always start a lot of his press conferences. I was looking at some of them on YouTube. They win a big game, and the first thing he'd sit down and look at the press. Not bad for a high school coach. And so he was letting them know. And of course, Udonis Haslam, who played a lot of years with the Miami Heat, and Steve Blake were his players in high school. So he's had NBA players come from his high school he's coached. So the guy knows what he's doing. Chuck Martin, I thought early on when we saw the rumors about who they could hire. That's the finger I put it on, because I said, wait a minute. First of all, this guy has been a head coach. It was tough at Marist, I understand, but he bounced around, had assistant's job, I think, at St. John's, had worked with John Calipari at Memphis. And that's an interesting story we're looking at tonight. Calipari interested in the president of the Knicks job. That's interesting.
Don't do it, John.
I think he's just flirting with Kentucky. Show me how much you love me.
That's right.
That's what I think he's doing. As we say in the trade, he's ATM in Kentucky. But the interesting thing about him is he'd been in the NBA 1 year as a scout, Oklahoma City Thunder. But then he came back to Indiana, one of the hot blood programs. And I said, he's looking for an assistant's job. He's from the Bronx. South Carolina had just won the Eastern Regional to make the Final Four in New York City.
That's right.
They're still a hot name in New York City. Some of the alumni that's there just literally pack Madison Square Garden. And so strike while the iron is hot and hire this guy and have him in the New York area. You got Schindler, who's from the DC area. Frank's from Florida. You got the Eastern Seaboard covered. So I just thought it was a natural fit. But he didn't listen to me. He took a few weeks before he hired the guy. But I just thought it was a natural fit.
We learned a lot in that presser. We learned that he likes the demeanor of Chuck Martin. Says he's not a laid back guy. Frank said, I'm not a laid back guy. I don't work well with laid back guys. And Chuck's not a laid back guy. Mm. We learned that he likes the idea of having someone who was not previously in a locker room with him. He made an interesting comment. He said, all the guys in that locker room with me, they've all been with me before. Chuck's never been with me before. So he likes the idea of having it. So we learned he would like some new blood. And we also learned that if you see Frank Martin in traffic, it would be in your best interest to acknowledge his presence.
Coach, kind of following up on that along with
Joe, by the way, you were right next to me at a light today. You didn't even acknowledge me.
Which light?
We're on Gervais Street. You were right next to me, and I'm trying, waving at you.
I was so hungry, Coach. I just came from another shoot. I was starving. Jesus, I was so dialed in on.
You're still pissed at me about that question 3 years ago?
I had $5. You're going to mention that today.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if you guys can see my feet under the thing here. I'm part of the Russian conspiracy, too. I bought these in Russia when I was coaching out there.
Joe Gorchal was so uncomfortable during all of that. So uncomfortable. How much of a lie was I was hungry? Because there's no way he was buried in his phone. And because if you listen to the presser, it's on SportsTalkSC. If you listen to the presser, Frank just got off talking about how much these players now are all into their phones. And we got to find a way to get to these kids. They're all in their phones. And so when he goes to poor Joe, who just I don't even remember what Joe wanted to ask him. And it doesn't matter. He goes to Joe, and Joe can't say, well, what restaurant were you going to, Joe? What were you so hungry for? I want answers. I want answers now. Can we get Joe on the line? Can we call Joe up quickly? We got 90 seconds. Get Joe on the line. Defend yourself, Joe. Clear the good name of the folks at, what is he at, WIS? WIS.
But I tell you what, Frank Martin did something I've never seen a coach do, and we probably won't see it again. And that is when he was at that presser after they lost to Gonzaga. You probably saw it. He was in tears. He straightened up his tie. He looked at it, and the guy from ESPN Deportes asked him, can you give me a layout of the game? And he just went through fluent Spanish and gave him a 2-minute thing about the game, and then turned and went into English for the next question.
He's something. He's definitely something. He also broke some news this afternoon. He will not be the next baseball coach at South Carolina. So we learned a lot from Frank Martin today. That'll do it for us this evening. Our thanks to David Hood, Mike Morgan, and Jake Williams for joining us tonight. We will be back with you tomorrow evening, 6 to 8 live on the South Carolina Radio Network.